With the constant bombardment of news coming at us all day long, it's easy to shut down and say, I don't care, this doesn't impact me. Well, think again. Hi, I'm Natalie Bencivenga, and I am back with a chance to dare to care. This show hopes to inspire so that we can see the connections between the issues that are impacting our communities and find ways to activate to make a difference. My latest guest is here to discuss marijuana legalization. And did you know that we really are closer than ever to real policy change here in Pennsylvania and at the federal level? I'm here with Patrick Nightingale, the Executive Director of Pittsburgh NORML. Patrick, how are you today?
I'm absolutely fantastic. And thank you so very, very much for having the opportunity to discuss this very important issue with your audience. So thank you.
How did you find your way into this work?
I became a cannabis consumer in the 1980s. At the same time, I'm going through law school, and I became a prosecutor working for the Allegheny County District Attorney's Office from 1996 to 2002. A period of time for which I'm very proud of the work that I did. I was one of the founders of the Domestic Violence Prosecution Unit. I did homicides. I even prosecuted a capital case, all the while leading a double life of being a cannabis consumer, knowing that if my colleagues found out about this, knowing that if my employer found out about this, not only would I lose my job, but I most likely would have lost my law license, have been forced into drug treatment, and then to come back hat in hand to beg to get my law license back. And slowly but surely, I said, this is ridiculous. And then once I was no longer employed with the district attorney's office, I became more and more willing to be open about my support for cannabis reform. And then finally in 2009, when Pennsylvania introduced its first medical marijuana bill, I decided it was time for me to add my voice.
For people that may not know, what is NORML?
NORML is the nation's longest and original marijuana advocacy organization that formed in 1972, right after the passage of the Controlled Substances Act that made cannabis, marijuana, a Schedule I controlled substance. It was founded by attorney Keith Strope. And back in the day, it seemed like there was a lot of momentum to kind of, bring some common sense to this. But here we are, literally 52 years later, and only now seeing some moderate federal reform. I, as the executive director of Pittsburgh NORML, have the ability to reach out to my local lawmakers and say, I'm here advocating on behalf of your constituents. We're Pittsburghers, and this is something that's important to us. Let's talk about the facts. Let's get past the reefer madness mentality. Let's get past the gateway drug nonsense and have an open and reasonable and evidence-based discussion about cannabis and its relative harms or lack thereof.
Yeah, and I'm really glad you brought all of that up because I think that there has been a shift, especially I've seen it as well over the last 5 or 10 years. Have you seen that shift happening with public opinion and now with lawmakers?
It's been a huge shift. I would call it a seismic shift.
Yeah.
At one point in time, even as recently as 10 to 15 years ago, we could count on one hand the number of supporters we had in the legislature. And, we had no supporters in the executive branch. Now, let's look at 2024. The governor of Pennsylvania is ready to sign a bill and has already incorporated marijuana sales tax revenue into his budget. The vice president of the United States of America sat down with those who had been convicted of federal cannabis possession and received pardons under Joe Biden's pardon process, and saying that she was dedicated to ending federal cannabis prohibition. We have significant support amongst Democrats, both federally and in Pennsylvania, and we have an increasing number of supporters from the Republican Party, which heretofore had, I would submit, been more skeptical, if not outright hostile. But now they see in their own states, in their own communities, that the cannabis industry is bringing jobs, it's creating revenue, and it's bringing people from the illicit marketplace into a well-regulated retail marketplace. So if you happen to be a conservative who supports business, who supports individual freedom, individual responsibility, this is right in your wheelhouse as well. And I think that now, we've gone from say a decade ago, maybe 30% public support for full legalization to
Mhm.
well over 60%
Wow.
Republicans and Democrats in support of full adult use legalization. So for those lawmakers who are worried that their constituents may have, punished them, come election time, they're seeing that this is politically safe, and we just have this growing tide of support for cannabis legalization, even here in a very purple Pennsylvania.
Okay, so let's talk about some new legislation that has recently dropped here in Pennsylvania. House Bill 2210. What is included in this bill and what are some of the criticisms around it?
House Bill 2210, similar to Senate Bill 846,
Mhm.
would create a comprehensive system of adult use legislation or adult use regulation
Mhm.
that would provide for licensing cultivators, processors, dispensaries. It
Wow.
has micro cultivation licenses, so Pennsylvania farmers can get into the business, and it's not going to be restricted to just the large multi-state operators that are dominating Pennsylvania's medical marijuana industry. It
Mm.
would provide for social justice in the form of retroactive expungements for all cannabis-related convictions,
Mhm.
even felony possession with intent, manufacturing, or delivery convictions. It would create a social equity program that would provide grants and low-interest loans to the communities that have been disproportionately affected by the war on cannabis, such as our lower-income urban communities in Pittsburgh and Philadelphia. And it would, otherwise, try to address all of the moving parts, including DUI, employment, housing, dependency, firearms rights. So, in terms of is House Bill 2210 covering all the bases, it is trying to do so.
Mhm.
But what I would submit is its biggest flaw, and
Mhm.
which will doom it in its infancy, are THC limits of 15% for flower and 40% for hashish cartridges or hash oil concentrates. And
Okay.
why do I say that that is going to kill it ab initio? It's because Pennsylvania consumers already have access to high THC products,
Mhm.
to high potency uh, concentrates. So,
Mhm.
if the goal of the program is to move consumers from the illicit marketplace into the regulated marketplace, why
Mhm.
would a Pennsylvania consumer who
Yeah.
already can get very high quality cannabis sourced from New York, New Jersey, Michigan, Oregon, Colorado, California, Arizona, Maryland, and soon to be Ohio, why would that consumer buy an inferior product from a regulated dispensary when
Mhm.
they already have access to higher quality products from the illicit marketplace? So what I have been preaching and screaming ever since I first saw this show up in Senate Bill 846, and which is now in House Bill 2210,
Mhm.
is this will not work. Everything else in this bill looks pretty good, but
Mhm.
that's an absolute dead on arrival consideration, in my opinion.
So, can you explain for people that might not know what the difference is between medical marijuana and recreational use? Because for some people, they may think that marijuana is just legal here in the state already, but that's not technically true, right?
It is not technically true. Pennsylvanians who have one of 23 qualifying conditions have
Mhm.
access to the medical marijuana program. If you do not have one of those qualifying conditions, then you have no ability to lawfully possess cannabis. Now,
Okay.
as far as the actual marijuana is concerned, there is no difference between, quote, medical marijuana or adult use or recreational marijuana. It's
Mhm.
the same plant, they're the same products.
Right.
And in states that have adult use, such as Michigan, for example, as a medical patient, I can go to Michigan and purchase cannabis products. If I was not a medical patient, I could go to Michigan and purchase medical cannabis products. The only difference would be that a medical patient may be able to buy products that are higher in the amount that they can buy.
I just wanted to get into this. The U.S. Drug Enforcement Administration, it says, will move to reclassify marijuana as a less dangerous drug. So concerning marijuana, this to me seems huge and something major that's happened over the last 50 years. But what does this actually mean? And is this going to get us a step closer to legalizing it for recreational use everywhere?
Yeah, in the short term, even a Schedule III controlled substance is 100% illegal to possess without a physician's
Okay.
prescription. So, generally speaking, it does not open the floodgates.
Mhm.
Had this happened 10 years ago, I would have been ecstatic.
Mhm.
Now that it's happening in 2024, I don't want to say that it's too little, too late. It's certainly an important piece of progress that we have. It's progress, not justice, which is a
Mhm.
refrain that I've been hearing from cannabis activists. In the short term, rescheduling a Schedule III may primarily benefit the corporate entities, the businesses acting in the cannabis space, by potentially giving them the opportunity to deduct operating costs on their federal taxes, which they could not do as a Schedule I controlled substance, giving them access to more traditional financing, possibly giving them the ability to invoke bankruptcy protections. For Pennsylvania medical marijuana patients, it may very well restore Second Amendment rights, because if one is a consumer of a Schedule I controlled substance, regardless of what a state says that they're able to do, the federal government and the DEA says you are still prohibited under federal law from possessing a firearm. And that affects Pennsylvanians who want to purchase new firearms and are subject to a background check where they have to fill out a federal form, or if they're seeking a concealed carry permit, which asks the question, are you otherwise prohibited under federal law from possessing a firearm? So that rescheduling to Schedule III, should, give those benefits to Pennsylvania medical marijuana patients. But
Mhm.
for Pennsylvania adult use consumers who are not patients, the rescheduling really is not going to have much of, if any, effect for them, because it's still illegal for them to possess under federal law.
Cannabis is now a $22.5 billion industry, and at the same time that there are record profits being made, more than 40,000 people are currently in prison for possessing marijuana. So can we talk a little bit about how marijuana is tied to our system of mass incarceration and who would benefit from it staying illegal at the federal level?
You know, Practically speaking, the vast majority of people who are prosecuted for violating cannabis offenses are prosecuted at the state level.
Mhm.
I do federal defense work, and I've done federal defense work since 2002. And
Mhm.
it is rare, at least here in the Western District of Pennsylvania, to see a cannabis-only indictment working its way through the courts. I
Okay.
happen to have two of them right now for clients who simply got caught and brought the attention of a federal drug task force. And it was a situation of, hey, this landed in the lap of, DEA agents, or landed in the lap of a federal task force. So they have no choice but to go forward with it. But nonetheless, there is a vested interest among law enforcement and corrections to try to stop any reform whatsoever, because they understand that if we legalize marijuana today, other controlled substances may come tomorrow, and that's going to cut out 50% of the federal prison population, because at least 50% of federal prisoners are there on some type of drug related offense. And I can't tell you specifically the statistics in Pennsylvania's Department of Corrections, but I guarantee you that a very, very large percentage of our prisoners serving state sentences are serving those for drug related offenses. So if you are a corrections officer, you see the possibility of losing your job if we cut the prison population by 25%, by 50%. If you are a law enforcement agency that is receiving federal grants to fight the war on drugs, you have a very vested interest in making sure that you still have these dollars coming in. But that is not, absolutely not, an adequate or justifiable reason to continue to ruin people's lives, to incarcerate people, to break up their families, to cause them to lose jobs, to cause them to lose custody of their children, to cause them to lose access to federal benefits, federally subsidized housing, federal student loans for possessing, consuming, or growing a plant.
Thank you for all of that information. But now let's talk a little bit about how does this intersect specifically with economic and racial justice, the idea of legalizing marijuana. What are your thoughts on that?
We know, statistically speaking, that Black and brown Pennsylvanians are 4 to 5 times more likely to be arrested, prosecuted, and convicted of a cannabis-related offense than people that look like me and you. So right there, that is a huge, huge, social equity issue. How can we not acknowledge this as, racially discriminatory? And that's why a social equity component is important in adult use legalization. That's why, friends and colleagues, especially in Philadelphia, such as DACO and people like Sharon Perry Thomas, are working very, very hard to say, hey, our communities have borne the brunt. We've been hit the hardest by this. Our men, our brothers, our sisters are the ones who are going to jail for this. And if we're going to set up a system that allows, millionaire hedge fund managers to invest and become even wealthier, we deserve a piece of the pie as well. And I support that. And I think that that's right. Let the market decide, whether or not minority-owned cultivation facilities and dispensaries are able to thrive, and not shut them out by introducing legislation such as the state store model that would allow the state to run cannabis dispensaries through state stores governed by or regulated by the Liquor Control Board, which is something that is gaining some traction in Harrisburg. If we go with something like that, well, great. Then the most that our friends in these disproportionately impacted communities can hope for is retail manager positions, as opposed to being their own business owners and employing people from their community and really bringing that economic development back into their community.
I mean, that in and of itself to me is a reason to dare to care. But what are some other reasons that people should care about this issue and consider it when they go to vote?
Why are we bringing Pennsylvanians, why are we bringing Americans into the criminal justice system over something that has 70% support nationally for legalization? Why are we bringing people into the criminal justice system and saddling them with probation and probation violations and making them go to court and making them pay for lawyers like myself, over something that now is legal for maybe 200 million Americans in states that have legalized for adult use? And why are we ignoring the potential economic impact of it? My wife happens to work for the industry. She has a salaried position with Cresco Labs, one of the large operators out of Chicago. She has benefits. She has paid time off. She has a retirement. She has stock options. These are very real, tangible economic impact that Pennsylvanians can take advantage of. There are 15,000 Pennsylvanians working in the legal medical marijuana industry. Let's open that to adult use. And what are we going to have? 50,000, maybe 100,000 people, with the same type of jobs, the same type of benefits. My wife, will go to communities that we would call red counties. Cresco's cultivation facility is in Jefferson County, and Jefferson County is a very Republican county. But she is constantly asked by community leaders in surrounding counties, how can we bring these jobs to our county? How can we bring these jobs to Elk County? How can we bring them to Clarion County? How can we bring them to Warren County? Well, the answer is simple: adult use legalization. And then the floodgates are open, and your entrepreneurs in your counties are free to go after licenses to bring in the same type of jobs that Jefferson County is enjoying right now. And then finally, there's simply the individual liberty and individual responsibility component of it. If we believe in limited government, if we believe in individual choice, individual freedom, individual responsibility, how can we oppose cannabis legalization? Now, certainly, if someone is an irresponsible cannabis user, if someone elects to drive while they're under the influence of cannabis, then they'll be punished accordingly. If someone elects to irresponsibly store their cannabis so their children get a hold of it, they will be punished accordingly, just the same as if they left their alcohol
Right.
or their prescription medication available to those children, or if they drove under the influence of alcohol or prescription medication. This reefer madness nonsense that has been perpetuated for decades. Simply, I think that Pennsylvanians, by and large, are understanding that they've been fed, a line of bull,
Yeah.
and that it is time to have a more intelligent conversation about it, and to stop, bringing people into the criminal justice system over something as simple as opting to consume a non-toxic, relatively harmless plant instead of alcohol.
Patrick, thank you so much for joining me for today's Dare to Care. If people want to learn more about Pittsburgh NORML or get involved, where can they go?
Well, we have a social media presence: Facebook, Pittsburgh NORML, Instagram, Pittsburgh NORML, and the national organization itself, their website, normal.org, is an extremely valuable clearinghouse for all information cannabis reform related. And if anyone wants to reach out to me to ask any questions, my email is pknlaw@mac.com.
Do you have an issue that matters to you and that you think more people should care about? Let's connect. Find me on social media at Natalie Bencivenga, or you can email me at admin@nataliebencivenga.com. I dare you.